His hand shot out and caught the glass jar an inch before it shattered on the tile, and the word came out of him before his brain could stop it. "Careful, baby." The whole aisle went dead silent. Olivia Bennett, the CEO, who could freeze a boardroom with one look, turned toward him slowly, her lips parting, her eyes wide. Daniel Carter felt the blood drain from his face. He was a single father. She signed his paycheck. He had just crossed a line that could end his career, his savings, everything he'd built for his little girl. But Olivia didn't look angry. She looked like she'd been waiting 3 years to hear it. "Now, before we go on, I want you to do something for me. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you've ever felt overlooked, invisible, like nobody saw the sacrifices you made, hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this one is for you." For 11 years, Daniel Carter had learned to make himself small. Not small in the way a coward gets small. Small in the way a man gets when he decides his own wants come dead last, behind everyone he's responsible for. He was 34 years old, and if you passed him on the street in Chicago, you wouldn't look twice. Gray coat, worn shoes, he kept polished anyway. A face that had stopped expecting good news a long time ago. He was a project coordinator at Bennett Group, one of the biggest firms in the city, and he was good at his job in the way invisible men are always good at their jobs, quietly, thoroughly, without ever being thanked for it. But that wasn't his life. That was just the thing that paid for his life. His life was a 7-year-old named Emma. "Dad?" Emma's voice came through the phone, small and serious. "Did you get the cereal with the marshmallows or the boring one?" Daniel stood in the break room at 6:40 in the evening, tie-loosened phone pressed to his ear. He smiled for the first time all day. "I'm still at work, sweetheart. I'll get it on the way home." "You said that yesterday." "I did get it yesterday." "You got the boring one." "The boring one is healthy." "The boring one tastes like a cardboard box," Emma said, and Daniel had to press his hand over his mouth so the other guy in the break room wouldn't hear him laugh. "Is Mrs. Alvarez still there with you?" "She's watching her show, the one where everybody yells." "Be nice, she's doing me a favor." There was a pause, and then Emma said the thing she always said, the thing that landed square in the middle of his chest every single time. "When are you coming home?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Soon, baby. I promise. Soon." He hung up, and for a second he just stood there holding the phone against his forehead. Every day it was the same question, and every day the answer was soon. And soon was never soon enough, because bills didn't care about a little girl's bedtime. He'd been carrying it alone for 3 years. His wife had left when Emma was 4. Just left. Packed a bag on a Tuesday and said she wasn't built for this, wasn't built for diapers and mortgages and a man who came home tired. She'd wanted the bigger life she'd been promised in her 20s, and Daniel wasn't it. He'd stood in the doorway and watched her car pull out, holding a 4-year-old who kept asking why Mommy was taking a trip without them. He never told Emma the truth. He just told her Mommy loved her wherever she was. Some nights he wasn't sure he still believed that. But he said it anyway because Emma needed to believe it, and Emma's needs came first. Emma's needs always came first. So no. Daniel Carter did not have room in his life for wanting things, which was a problem. Because for 3 years he had wanted exactly one thing he was never ever going to let himself have. Her name was Olivia Bennett, and she owned the building he walked into every morning. She'd built the company from nothing. That wasn't corporate mythology. Daniel had been there long enough to know it was true. She'd started at 26 with a rented office and a phone, and by 31, she ran 3 floors and 400 employees. She was the kind of brilliant that made other smart people quiet down when she walked in. Elegant, precise, never a hair out of place, and cold. That's what everyone said. The Ice Queen. They said it in the elevators when they thought no one important was listening. They said she didn't have a heart, that she'd traded it for the corner office. Daniel didn't say it, because Daniel had seen things the others hadn't. He'd seen her at 9 p.m. on a Friday, the only light on the whole floor coming from her office, because she had nowhere she'd rather be than at work. A man doesn't stay that late by choice. A man stays that late because home is emptier than the office. He'd seen her keep a child's drawing. That one had done something to him he couldn't undo. It was a stupid little thing. One of the sales guys had brought his kid to the office on a holiday, and the kid had drawn a crayon picture of a lopsided cat and left it on a desk. Daniel had watched Olivia pick it up when she thought the floor was empty. He'd watched her look at it for a long time, and then he'd watched her fold it careful as anything and slip it into her bag. The CEO, who supposedly had no heart keeping a stranger's kid's crayon cat like it was worth something. That was the moment Daniel stopped seeing his boss and started seeing Olivia. A woman who'd built a fortress because somebody somewhere a long time ago had taught her that people only came close to take something. He never told a soul. He just started remembering her coffee order. Black, no sugar, but a splash of oat milk on the hard days, and he'd learned to read which days were the hard days. He started staying late to help the junior staff so they wouldn't cry at their desks, and he told himself it was for them, and mostly it was, but part of it was because he knew she noticed. He started being the one steady thing in a building full of people who were scared of her, and he told himself every single day the same sentence. She is your boss. You are a single father barely keeping the lights on. There is a line, and you will not cross it, because she has too much to lose, and so do you. He was very good at telling himself things. It was a Thursday when the line got crossed, and it started with a car that wouldn't start. They'd been in a late meeting, a brutal one, a negotiation with a supplier that had run 2 hours past when it should have ended. When it finally broke up at 7, Daniel was gathering his things when he heard Olivia in the hallway on the phone, and something in her voice made him stop. What do you mean it's not ready? I was told 6 o'clock. A pause. No, I understand. It's fine. Her voice was perfectly level, which was how Daniel knew it wasn't fine at all. She hung up. Stood there in the empty hallway holding her phone, and for just a second, 1 second, before she remembered to put the armor back on, she looked tired. Not boardroom tired. Person tired. Daniel should have walked past. That was the smart move. Nod, say goodnight. Go home to his daughter. Instead, he heard himself say, "Everything okay, Ms. Bennett?" She turned surprised to find anyone still there. "Daniel?" She almost smiled. Almost. "The shop didn't finish my car. I'll call a service. I can drive you?" The words were out before he weighed them. And he watched her weigh them for him, the CEO calculation, the what does he want reflex. He'd seen her run on everyone. He watched it start, and then strangely, he watched it stop. "You have your daughter," she said, quietly, like she was surprised she knew that. Daniel blinked. "She's with the sitter till 9. It's on my way. It's not a thing, Ms. Bennett, it's a ride." "It's not on your way. You live in Portage Park. I live downtown." He stared at her. She knew where he lived. Out of 400 people, she knew the neighborhood of the guy who coordinated projects. "It's on my way," he said again, and this time it came out gentler, "because I'm making it on my way." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. And then Olivia Bennett, who did not accept help from anyone ever, because accepting help meant owing something, and owing something meant getting hurt, said, "Okay. Just that. Okay." He would think about that okay for a long time afterward. In the car, she was quiet, and he let her be quiet. He didn't fill the silence with talk about the deal or the quarter or any of the things people usually threw at her to seem important. He just drove. Somewhere around the halfway point, she said out of nowhere, "You didn't ask me for anything." "Ma'am, when you offered. You didn't work it into a favor. People always work it into a favor." She was looking out the window. "There's always a by the way." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "I don't have a by the way." "Everyone has a by the way." "Then I guess I'm broken," he said. And she laughed. It caught him completely off guard, a real one, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she could catch it the same way things escaped from Daniel. He glanced over and she'd put her hand up over her mouth like she was embarrassed by the sound of her own laughter. You should do that more often, he said before he could stop himself. Do what? That. She didn't answer. But she didn't put the armor back on either. And that was new. That's when she'd said, almost as an afterthought, I need to stop at the store. I have nothing at home. It'll take 5 minutes. Sure, Daniel said. He had no idea he was driving toward the moment that would blow his entire careful life apart. The supermarket was almost empty at that hour. Fluorescent hum one bored cashier, a floor guy, mopping down at the far end. Olivia grabbed a basket like she wasn't entirely sure how to hold it, and Daniel realized watching her that she probably hadn't done her own grocery shopping in years. There was something almost childlike in the way she looked at the shelves. You don't cook, he said. It wasn't a question. I intend to cook, constantly, in theory. She picked up a jar of pasta sauce, studied the label like it was a contract. In practice, I eat standing over the sink at 11 at night. That's not eating. That's grazing. It's efficient. It's sad, Daniel said, and then winced because you don't tell your boss her life is sad. I'm sorry that came out. No. She put the jar in the basket. It is sad. You're allowed to say true things, Daniel. Almost nobody around me does anymore. They moved down the aisle, and something loosened between them with every step. She asked him what a 7-year-old eats, really eats not what a magazine says they should eat. And he told her the truth, that Emma would live on marshmallow cereal and buttered noodles if he let her. That half of parenting was just quietly negotiating with a tiny person who did not respect your authority. She laughed again twice more. He was starting to collect them, those laughs, like they were worth money. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why do you do it? Stay late for the junior staff. You don't get paid for it. Half of them will leave in a year for a better title somewhere else. She looked at him sideways. There's no by the way in it for you either. Daniel thought about it. He wanted to give her a real answer because she'd given him real ones. Because somebody stayed late for me once, he said. When I first started out years ago at another company, I was drowning. Brand new dad-wife, already halfway out the door. No idea what I was doing. And this old guy must have been 65 on his way to retirement. No reason to care about me. He stayed till 9 o'clock 2 nights a week for a month and taught me how to not get fired. He shrugged. He didn't want anything. I asked him once why he did it. You know what he said? What? He said somebody did it for me. You'll do it for somebody else. That's the whole thing. That's the whole point of the thing. Daniel's throat tightened unexpectedly. He died about a year later. Never got to tell him it worked, so I figure I owe him a few late nights. Olivia had stopped walking. She was looking at him like she was seeing something she hadn't known was possible. Like he'd shown her a color that didn't exist. Nobody talks like you, she said quietly. I talk too much. My daughter says I'm exhausting. No. She shook her head slowly. You talk like somebody who still believes it's worth being decent. I forgot people like you existed. I decided you didn't. It was easier. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said the truest thing he had. You existed the whole time, though. Under the... He gestured vaguely at Oliver, the suit, the posture, the armor. Under all that, I've seen it. Her eyes changed. Seen what? The you that keeps a stranger's kid's crayon drawing in her bag, Daniel said. He watched the color leave her face. How do you... I was there, late. I wasn't spying. I saw. And I never told anyone, and I never will. He held her gaze. I just want you to know that somebody saw the real one, and thought she was worth more than the ice they all talk about. For a moment, Olivia Bennett looked like she might cry right there in aisle 7 of a half-empty supermarket. Her lips pressed together. Her chin did the smallest thing, the thing chins do right before they betray you. And then she turned away fast, blinking, and reached up toward the top shelf for something, anything, a task to put her hands to so she wouldn't fall apart in front of an employee. Her fingers caught the edge of a heavy glass jar of preserves. It slipped. And Daniel's whole body moved on instinct, the same instinct that had kept a 4-year-old from tumbling downstairs, that snatched Emma's hand back from hot stoves, that fatherhood burns into a man until it's faster than thought. His hand shot out, caught the jar clean, an inch from the tile, and the word came out of the deepest, most protected, most locked-away room inside him. The room he never let anyone near, because in that split second, his heart didn't know she was his boss. His heart only knew she was someone he'd been quietly, hopelessly caring for 3 years. Careful, baby. The silence that followed was the loudest silence of Daniel Carter's life. He heard the fluorescent hum. He heard the far-off slosh of the mop. He heard his own heartbeat going off like an alarm. Baby. He had called his boss, the woman who signed his checks, who could end him, who owned the roof over his daughter's head, baby in a grocery store, out loud. The jar was still in his hand. He set it on the shelf very slowly, like a man defusing a bomb, and when he turned back, she was staring at him, and every word of the apology he needed came crowding up his throat at once. His voice cracked. Ms. Bennett, I am so sorry. I meant careful. Just careful. It's a reflex. I say it to my daughter. It doesn't mean I would never. Daniel. I know that was completely inappropriate, and I swear to you it will never happen again. And if you want to. Daniel. He stopped. Olivia had turned all the way to face him now, and her face wasn't cold. Her face wasn't offended. Her face wasn't the CEO's face at all. Her eyes were wet. What did you just call me? She whispered. Daniel's stomach dropped through the floor. I said careful? No. She took a step toward him. You didn't. Ms. Bennett, stop! Her voice shook. Stop calling me that! Right now in this aisle, stop calling me that! He froze. And then Olivia Bennett, the untouchable, the Ice Queen, the woman 400 people were afraid of, did something Daniel Carter would remember on his deathbed. She smiled. A small, cracked, trembling smile. The smile of someone who has been standing in the cold so long they'd forgotten what warm felt like and had just felt it. Say it again, she said. Daniel couldn't breathe. Ms. Bennett, I don't think... Do you know how long it's been? She said. And now the tears were spilling over, running down that flawless face while she smiled through them. Since anyone said a word like that to me and meant it. Do you have any idea? She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. For a second, gathered herself, dropped it. My ex-fiancé called me sweetheart in front of investors and the account in front of his friends. My father calls me the company. Not one person in my entire life has caught something before it fell and called me... Her voice broke completely, called me baby. Like it was just the truest thing in his body. It wasn't supposed to come out, Daniel said, barely audible. I know. She was crying and smiling and looking at him like he was the first warm thing in a long winter. That's why. That's the whole reason it means anything. Because you didn't decide to say it. It lives in you, doesn't it? Daniel stood there in the fluorescent hum with his heart cracked wide open, 3 years of don't cross the line lying in pieces on the floor between them, and he understood there was no putting it back. He'd shown her the room he never showed anyone. The door was open now. Yeah, he said hoarsely. It lives in me. Since when? Olivia. It was the first time he'd used her name, just her name, and he watched it land on her like a hand on a shoulder. You're my boss. I have a daughter. I have nothing. You have everything. This can't... I didn't ask you what it can't be, she said. I asked you since when. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he stopped protecting himself for the first time in years because she deserved the truth, and he was too tired to keep hiding it. Since the crayon cat, he said. Since I watched you fold up some stranger's kid's drawing and put it in your bag like it was the only thing anybody ever gave you for free. That's since when? Olivia made a sound half sob, half laugh, and pressed both hands over her mouth. I've waited so long, she whispered through her fingers so quietly he almost missed it. I've waited so long for someone to see that and not run. And Daniel Carter, single father, invisible man. The guy nobody ever looked at. Twice stood in aisle 7 and realized that one accidental word had just torn down the wall he'd spent 3 years building, and that on the other side of that wall, all this time, someone had been waiting for him too. He didn't know yet what it would cost him. He didn't know about her father or the fiancé, who wasn't as gone as everyone thought, or the choice that was coming for both of them. The one that would put everything Olivia had built on one side of a room and Daniel on the other, and make her choose in front of everyone she knew. All he knew in that fluorescent-lit aisle, with a jar of preserves safe on the shelf, and his boss crying and smiling 6 inches from his face, was that the word was out, and there was no taking it back. They drove back downtown, in a silence that felt nothing like the silence on the way over. On the way over, the quiet had been 2 strangers being careful. Now, it was 2 people who had said too much and didn't know how to say anything smaller. Daniel kept both hands on the wheel. Olivia kept her eyes on the window, but every so often he caught her reflection in the glass, and she was still almost smiling, like her face had forgotten how to stop. "You can drop me at the corner," she said when they got close. "I'll take you to the door." "The corner's fine." "Olivia." He said her name carefully, testing whether he was still allowed to. "It's dark, and it's cold, and I'm not dropping you at a corner. I'd do it for anybody." "That's the problem with you," she said quietly. "You'd do it for anybody." "So how am I supposed to know when you're doing it for me?" He didn't have an answer for that. He pulled up to her building, a tower of glass that probably cost more than every place he'd ever lived stacked on top of each other, and he put the car in park, and neither of them moved. "I have to get Emma," he said finally. "The sitter leaves at 9. "I know. Go." But she didn't reach for the door. "Daniel, tomorrow, at work." "I know. We can't." "I know. We're going to walk in tomorrow, and I'm going to be your boss, and you're going to be my coordinator, and none of this." She gestured at the space between them in the dark car. "None of this can be anywhere on our faces. Do you understand what happens to me if it is? Do you understand what they already say about me? A woman like me, a man like you, an office like that, they'll say I—" She stopped. "They'll say things." "I understand," Danielle said. And he did. He understood better than she thought. He'd spent his whole life being the man things happened to, not the man people gossiped about, and he knew exactly which one of them the story would land on hardest, and it wasn't him. It was never the man. "Nothing on my face, I promise." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she opened the door, and the cold came in and she got out. But before she shut it, she leaned back down. "For the record," she said, "I'm not sorry you said it." And then she was gone, walking into that glass tower with her spine straight and her armor back on, and Daniel sat there for a full minute before he remembered he had a daughter to pick up. That night, after Emma was asleep, after the marshmallow cereal had been secured, and the bedtime story read, and the small warm weight of her had finally gone still against him, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and put his face in his hands and did not know whether he'd just gained something or lost everything. The next morning he found out it was going to be both. He walked into Bennett Group at 8 sharp, same as always, and there she was crossing the lobby with 2 vice presidents flanking her talking numbers, and she didn't look at him. Not a flicker. She walked past him like he was furniture, and it was exactly what they'd agreed on, exactly what he'd promised, and it still went through him like a blade. He almost laughed at himself. One night, one word in a grocery store, and he'd already turned into the kind of fool who felt a knife because a woman didn't look at him. He got in the elevator, stared at the numbers, told himself to grow up. And then his phone buzzed. A message. From a number that wasn't in his contacts. 3rd floor supply room. 2 minutes. Bring the Hargrove file so it looks like a reason. He stood in the elevator with his heart going sideways. He knew that supply room. Nobody used that supply room. He grabbed the Hargrove file off his desk, walked down the hall with his face perfectly neutral, and stepped into a windowless room full of printer paper, and she was already there. And the second the door clicked shut, she said, "I couldn't do it." "Do what?" "Walk past you, just now. I did it. I made myself do it, and it was—" She pressed her palm flat against a shelf of copier boxes like she needed something to hold on to. "I have walked past 1,000 people in that lobby. It has never once cost me anything. And I walked past you, and it cost me the whole morning." Daniel set the file down slowly. "Olivia, you called me into a supply closet. I know how it looks. It looks like exactly the thing you told me last night could destroy you. I know how it looks." She said it in a fierce whisper, and then closed her eyes and got herself under control, and when she opened them again, she was steadier. "That's the problem. That's exactly the problem. I have spent 12 years learning how everything looks. I know how everything looks. I've never once let myself think about how anything feels, and then you catch a jar and say one word, and now I can't stop thinking about how things feel, and I hate it, and I—" Her voice dropped. "And I don't want it to stop." He crossed the small room. He didn't touch her. He just stood close enough that she had to look up at him. "Then here's what we're going to do," he said, and there was a steadiness in his voice that surprised even him. "We're not doing this in a supply closet like something we're ashamed of. Because I'm not ashamed of a single thing about you, and I won't start now. If we do this, whatever this is, we do it slow, and we do it real, and we do it in a way that doesn't blow up your life or my daughter's. Deal?" "You keep saying your daughter, because she's the deal breaker," Daniel said simply. "Anything that hurts her, I walk away from. Even you, especially you if it came to that. That's not a threat, that's who I am. She lost one mother. She's not losing another woman she gets attached to. So if this is a thing you're doing because your car broke down and you got lonely for a night, tell me now, and I'll go back to my desk, and we'll never speak of it, and I won't even be mad. But if you let my kid near you, and then you leave, I will never forgive you. So you have to be sure. You have to be more sure than you've ever been about anything." Olivia stared at him, and something moved across her face that he'd never seen on her, not in 3 years, not on anyone that powerful, something that looked almost like fear, but the good kind. The kind you feel standing at the edge of something you actually want. "Nobody's ever protected anything from me before," she said. "Usually I'm the thing people protect their families with. The big client. The connection. And you're standing here telling me your 7-year-old outranks me." A wet laugh escaped her. "God, that might be the most attractive thing anyone's ever said to me." "Olivia." "I'm sure," she said. "I don't know how I'm sure this fast. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm sure. And that should have been the moment. That should have been the beginning of everything easy." It wasn't because the supply room door opened. They both turned. Standing in the doorway with a stack of folders and a look on his face that Daniel would come to know very well was a man named Marcus Webb, head of operations, second in command. The kind of man who smiled a lot and meant none of it. "Ms. Bennett?" Marcus's eyes went from her to Daniel to the 8 inches of air between them, and his smile got a little wider. "The Hargrove numbers. I've been looking everywhere for that file." "Mr. Carter was just bringing it to me," Olivia said, and her voice was ice again, perfect ice, not a crack in it. "We stepped in here because the hall was loud. Is there a problem, Marcus?" "No problem," Marcus said. "No problem at all." But he held the door open a beat too long, and he looked at Daniel a beat too long, and when Daniel walked past him with the Hargrove file, Marcus said very softly, just for him, "Careful." And Daniel felt the whole floor go cold under his feet, because that was the word. That was the word. And there was no way Marcus Webb could know that, unless he'd been outside that door longer than 2 seconds. Daniel went back to his desk and sat down and stared at his monitor without seeing it. And his hands were not entirely steady, and he thought it's already starting. He was right. But he was wrong about the shape of it. Because over the next 2 weeks, the thing between him and Olivia did not go up in flames the way he braced for. It did something stranger. It got real. She stopped hiding it at work, but she got smart about it, and so did he. It looked to anyone watching like a boss who'd finally noticed a competent employee. She started pulling him into meetings, big ones, the kind a project coordinator had no business being in, and the maddening part, the part that shut up the whisperers, was that he was good in them. He saw things. He'd sit in the corner and say one quiet sentence, and it would turn out to be the sentence that saved a deal, and the VPs started actually listening when he talked, and Marcus Webb watched all of it, with that smile that never reached his eyes. But the real thing, the thing that mattered, happened after 5 o'clock in 100 small ways that had nothing to do with the office. She texted him at 11 at night, "I bought vegetables. I don't know what to do with vegetables." He texted back, "Step 1, don't let them see fear." She sent a photo an hour later of something charred and unrecognizable in a pan with the caption, "They saw fear." He laughed so hard alone in his kitchen that Emma called out sleepily from her room to ask what was funny. It was small, it was stupid. It was the most human he'd ever known her to be. The woman who ran 3 floors couldn't cook an egg, and she let him know it. And letting someone know a thing like that, a small, true, useless failure, was the most trust Olivia Bennett had ever handed anybody in her adult life. And Daniel knew it, and he held it carefully. 10 days in, she asked the question he'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. When do I get to meet her? He stared at that text for 20 minutes. Because meeting Emma wasn't a date. Meeting Emma was the deal breaker made real. Meeting Emma meant the little girl who'd already lost one woman would start building a person into her heart, and if it went wrong, it wouldn't be Daniel's heart that broke. It would be a 7-year-old's. He didn't answer that night. He didn't answer the next day. And Olivia, to her enormous credit, didn't push. She just sent the following evening, "I'm not going to disappear. I know you don't believe that yet. But I'm going to still be here when you're ready, and I'm going to be here after that too, and eventually you're going to run out of reasons to be scared. Take your time." And that patience, that refusal to force his hand with his own child, was the thing that finally made Daniel Carter fall the rest of the way. Not her power. Not her beauty. The fact that she understood without being told twice that Emma came first, and she was willing to wait behind a 7-year-old in the line for his heart. So on a Saturday he texted back 3 words. "Come for dinner." He made spaghetti because it was the only thing he made well. He cleaned the apartment twice. He told Emma a friend from work was coming, and Emma, who was 7, and therefore ran the whole household emotionally, narrowed her eyes and said, "A girlfriend or a friend. Just eat your spaghetti when it's time." That's not an answer, Dad. Olivia showed up at 6 on the dot in jeans. Jeans. Daniel hadn't known she owned jeans. She stood in his doorway, holding a grocery bag, and looking for the first time since he'd known her, genuinely nervous, the CEO, who negotiated with billionaires, terrified of a 2nd grader, and she said, "I didn't know what a child likes, so I brought everything. I brought all of it. There's ice cream. There's 3 kinds. I panicked." And from behind Daniel's leg, a small voice said, "3 kinds." That was the whole battle right there. 3 kinds of ice cream. Emma Carter was bought and paid for. Dinner was loud and easy in a way Daniel hadn't felt in his own home in years. Emma interrogated Olivia like a tiny detective. Did she have a cat? Why not? Did she have a pool? What was her favorite color? Did she know that? Daniel snored, and Olivia answered every single question with total seriousness, treating a 7-year-old's questions like a board of directors, and Emma glowed under the attention like a plant that had finally been put in the sun. And Daniel stood at the sink watching them, and felt something in his chest he was afraid to name, because naming it would make it real, and real things could be taken away. Later, after the ice cream, after Emma had shown Olivia every drawing she'd ever made, and Olivia had studied each one like it was a Rembrandt, Emma fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, the way only children can. Daniel carried her to bed. When he came back, Olivia was standing in the middle of his small living room, looking around at all of it, the old furniture, the crayon art taped to the walls, the whole modest, careful world he'd built, and there were tears on her face. "Hey," he said, alarmed. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." She wiped her cheeks fast. "That's the thing. Nothing happened. It was just dinner. And a kid asking me if I have a pool. And it was the best night of my entire life. Daniel and I don't even understand why, and that scares me more than anything ever has, because I built an empire, and nothing in it ever made me feel like your kid showing me a drawing of a dog that looks like a potato." "That was a cat. It was a potato, Daniel. We both know it was a potato." He crossed the room, and for the first time he pulled her into his arms, and she came in without a fight, and she pressed her face into his shoulder, and the most powerful woman he'd ever met stood in his tiny living room in borrowed courage and cried into the shirt of a man who owned nothing. "I keep waiting for the catch," she said into his shoulder. "There's always a catch." "Where's the catch?" "There's no catch." "There's always Olivia." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. I don't want your company. I don't want your money. I don't want your connections, or your name, or a single thing you can do for me. I have looked, believe me. I've dug around in myself looking for the angle, because I didn't trust it either. There's no angle. I just want you, the one who can't cook an egg, the one who cries about potato dogs. That one. That's the one I want." She looked at him for a long, long moment, and then she kissed him. And it was nothing like he'd imagined in the years he'd told himself not to imagine it. It was clumsy, and it was real, and it had 11 years of loneliness on both sides packed into it. And when they finally broke apart, she laughed and he laughed, and neither of them could stop for a second, two grown people undone by relief. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, no catch, I believe you. God help me, I believe you." He should have known. He should have known the catch was never going to come from him or from her. It was going to come from outside. It came 4 days later, and it came in a black car. Daniel was leaving the building at 7 when a car he didn't recognize pulled up beside him at the curb, and the back window rolled down, and a man he'd never met but somehow instantly understood was looking at him. Silver-haired. Expensive coat. The kind of face that had gotten its way for 60 years and had stopped considering the possibility of not getting its way. "Mr. Carter," the man said. "Not a question. Get in. I'll have my driver run you home to Portage Park after. You'll want to hear this in private." Daniel didn't move. "I don't know you." "You know my daughter," the man said. "Rather well from what I'm told. Get in the car, Mr. Carter. I'd like 10 minutes. I'm going to give you a great deal of money, and I'd like to explain why." And Daniel Carter, standing on a Chicago sidewalk in the cold, understood that the catch had arrived, and its name was Richard Bennett. He got in the car. Later, he'd ask himself why. The honest answer was that he wanted to see it the shape of what he was up against. Better to look it in the eye. Richard Bennett didn't waste time. The car pulled into traffic, and he turned to Daniel and said, "My daughter is the most valuable thing I've ever built. More valuable than the company. The company was just how I built her. Do you understand?" "You didn't build her," Daniel said. "She built the company. From nothing. I've seen it. You didn't hand her anything." Something flickered in the old man's eyes. Surprise. Maybe that the furniture had opinions. "You're right. She's better than I ever was. Which is exactly why she isn't going to throw it away on a—" He glanced at Daniel's coat, his shoes, all of it, and didn't finish the sentence because the sentence didn't need finishing. "On a what?" Daniel said quietly. "I'm going to be honest with you because I think you're a smart man, and I don't insult smart men. You're not a bad choice because you're poor. Poor I can fix. Poor is a Tuesday. You're a bad choice because you make her soft." He said the word like it tasted wrong. "I've watched her for 2 weeks. She laughs in meetings now. She left at 6 on Thursday. 6. In 12 years, my daughter has never once left at 6. You are unwinding the exact thing that makes her formidable, And in about a year, when the softness has cost her a deal or a board seat or her nerve, she is going to blame you, and she is going to be right, and then she'll hate you, and she'll hate me for letting it happen. So I'm going to stop it now while it's cheap." He reached into his coat and set an envelope on the seat between them. "That's a number," Richard said. "There's a second number if the first one isn't enough. All you have to do is become unavailable. Take a job in another city. I'll arrange it, a good one, a real promotion. Your daughter can go to a better school. You don't even have to be cruel to Olivia. Just fade. Get busy. Grow distant. Let her decide it wasn't going to work. She'll recover. She recovers from everything. It's what I raised her to do." Daniel looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. "You raised her to recover from everything," he said slowly, "because you never once let her keep anything that could break, didn't you?" The old man went very still. "You made her hard so nothing could hurt her, and it worked. And now she's 31, and she keeps a stranger's kid's crayon drawing in her purse because it's the closest thing to love she's ever been allowed to hold on to." Daniel's voice didn't rise. It got quieter, and somehow that was worse. "I'm not going to take your money, Mr. Bennett. Not because I'm noble. I've got nothing I could use it. My kid could use it, believe me. I've done that math in the last 4 minutes. I'm not taking it because I finally figured out what the catch was, and it's you. It was always going to be you. You're the reason she doesn't believe anybody stays." "Stop the car," Richard said to the driver. The car stopped. They were nowhere near Portage Park. "You'll walk from here," the old man said. "And Mr. Carter, I gave you the easy version. Take the money, fade out, everyone stays friends. You've turned it down. That's your right. But I want you to understand what you've turned down toward. I have spent 40 years learning how to make problems disappear, and I have never once needed the easy version twice." He looked out the windshield. "There's someone I'd like Olivia to reconsider. Someone who understands what she is and won't make her soft. He's coming back to the city next week. She's going to see a great deal of him. And you're going to watch it happen, and there won't be a single thing you can do about it, because you're a project coordinator's son, and he owns half of what your company depends on to survive." The name came out like the closing of a door. Alexander Reed. Daniel got out of the car in a part of the city he didn't know, in the cold, with the envelope still sitting untouched on the seat, and he watched the black car pull away, and he understood that the easy part of loving Olivia Bennett was over. He didn't tell her that night. He wanted to. He stood in his kitchen with his phone in his hand for an hour, but he knew the same way he knew things in meetings. The quiet way that if he told her, "Your father cornered me and offered me money to disappear," she would go to war with her father. And Richard Bennett had just spent 10 minutes explaining exactly how good he was at war, and Daniel would be the ground it was fought on. Olivia would lose things. Maybe everything. Because of him. So he made a decision. A bad one, maybe. The kind of decision decent men make when they love someone and don't have enough power to protect them any other way. He decided to carry it alone. Like he carried everything. He almost got away with it for 3 days. Then, on the 4th day, Olivia walked into his office, his actual office, in front of people not caring anymore, and shut the door, and her face was white, and she said, "I need you to tell me the truth right now, and I need you to not manage me." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Okay. Did my father get in a car with you last Thursday?" He went very still. "Marcus saw you," she said. "Marcus saw you get in my father's car outside the building, and he came to me this morning so pleased, so happy to help. And he said, maybe I should ask my new favorite coordinator why he's taking private meetings with the one man in the world who wants us over." And I laughed at him, Daniel. I laughed in his face, and I told him he was pathetic, and I came down here, sure, completely sure that you were going to tell me it never happened. Her voice cracked straight down the middle. "So tell me it never happened." And Daniel Carter had to make a choice in about 2 seconds between the lie that would keep the peace and the truth that would blow it all open. He'd spent his whole life choosing the version that kept the peace. "It happened," he said. Olivia flinched like he'd struck her. "He offered you money?" "Yes." "How much?" "I didn't open the envelope." "How much, Daniel?" "I don't know, Olivia, because I didn't open the envelope, because I wasn't going to take it, because there is no number. Then why didn't you tell me? And now she wasn't the CEO, she was just a woman who'd been left before standing in a small office watching it start to happen again, in a way she recognized. 3 days. You sat across from me for 3 days, and you knew my father had you let me walk around thinking. She pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth. You made a decision about my life without me. You did exactly what he does. You decided what I could handle. You decided to protect me by keeping me in the dark, which is the single thing, the one thing I have spent my whole life, I know, being done to by men who... Olivia, I know, I did it wrong. Then why? And there it was. The mini-truth under the big truth, the thing he hadn't even admitted to himself until she stood there demanding it. Because I was scared that if you had to choose between me and your father, you'd choose him, Daniel said. And I couldn't stand to watch it. So I figured I'd just take the hit myself, quietly, like always. It was cowardice, Olivia. It looked like protecting you, but it was me protecting me from having to find out where I rank. He was breathing hard. There, that's the whole ugly thing. I'm sorry. The office went silent. Olivia stood there, and he watched her fury run straight into his honesty and have nowhere to go, because you can't stay furious at a man who just handed you the worst true thing about himself. You think I'd choose him, she said finally, very quietly. I think he's your father, and he's got 40 years of practice, and I've got a spaghetti recipe and a kid. I think if it came down to it, I'd understand if you chose the empire. It's yours. You built it. I'd never blame you. And that was the wrong thing to say, and the right thing to say at the exact same time. Because Olivia's face crumpled and she crossed the room and she grabbed the front of his shirt in both fists and she said in a voice shaking with something between rage and love, "Don't you dare do the noble thing where you let me go for my own good. Don't you dare. My whole life people have decided things for me about me around me, and I let them because I thought that's what love looked like, people managing you. You are not going to be one more person who manages me. If you're scared where you rank, then you ask me. You don't decide. You ask." "Okay," Daniel breathed. "Where do I rank?" "You and that little girl are the only thing I've ever wanted that wasn't on a balance sheet," Olivia said. "That's where you rank. You rank above the company. You rank above my father. You rank above the version of me he built. That's where you rank, and it terrifies me. And if you ever hide something from me again to protect me, I will end this because I would rather lose you honestly than keep you as one more man who lies to me softly. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it. I understand. No more managing. No more carrying it alone." He put his hands over her fists, still gripping his shirt. "But Olivia, you need to know the rest of it. Because I'm not managing you anymore, so you get all of it. There's more." She went still. "More?" "Your father didn't just offer me money to leave." Daniel held her eyes. "He told me who he wants you with instead. He told me the guy's coming back to the city. Next week." He watched the understanding move across her face, watched the color drain, and then rush back. Watched 12 years of history rise up behind her eyes, and she said the name before he could, in a whisper that had a whole ruined past folded inside it. "Alexander." "He's coming back," Daniel said, "and your father's already clearing the road for him. And I don't have the money or the power to stop any of it. All I've got is the truth, so I'm giving it to you now. All of it, no managing." His voice roughened. "Your father thinks I'll fade out, and you'll go back to the man who fits the picture. And the worst part, Olivia, the part that keeps me up is, I don't know if he's wrong. Because Alexander can give you a world I can't. And your father's going to spend the next month reminding you of that every single day. And I can't outspend him, and I can't outmaneuver him. All I can do is stand here and love you and hope it's enough, and I have never in my life felt so much like it wasn't going to be enough." For a long moment, Olivia didn't say anything. Then she let go of his shirt, smoothed it down slowly where she'd crushed it in her fists. And when she looked up, the tears were gone, and something else was there instead. Something Daniel had seen exactly once in a boardroom, right before she'd taken apart a man twice her age who'd underestimated her. "My father made one mistake," she said. "What's that?" "He came to you first." Her voice was steel now, but warm steel with him inside it instead of against him. "He was so sure you'd take the money that he tipped his whole hand. He told you the plan. Alexander the timing all of it. He thinks he's playing chess against a project coordinator." A dangerous, beautiful smile touched the corner of her mouth. He forgot who he raised. He forgot that the reason I'm so good at making problems disappear is that he taught me. He handed me the whole board Daniel threw you 4 days early. And now I know exactly what's coming. Daniel stared at her. "What are you going to do?" She said. "What are we going to do? That's the difference now. That's the whole difference." She took his hand. "You've spent your whole life carrying things alone. I've spent mine fighting alone. Neither one of us has ever had a partner in the room." She squeezed. "So here's the first thing we're going to do together. When Alexander Reed walks back into this city expecting to find me softened up and my father's road cleared and you faded quietly into the background," she leaned in close, "he's going to find the two of us standing in the road, together, in front of everyone. And my father is going to learn that the thing he built to survive anything has finally found the one thing worth stopping being alone for." And in that small office with Marcus Webb's poison already spreading somewhere down the hall, and Richard Bennett's black car somewhere in the city, and Alexander Reed somewhere on a plane heading straight for them, Daniel Carter looked at the woman holding his hand and understood that he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. For the first time in 11 years, someone had stepped into the road beside him. He just didn't know yet how much it was going to cost them both to hold that ground. Alexander Reed came back on a Tuesday, and he did it the way rich men do things, when they want to be seen, not quietly, not through a side door, but straight through the front of Bennett Group at 9 in the morning, with a bouquet in his hand, and a smile that had been photographed for magazines. Daniel was in the lobby when it happened. He'd been walking Emma's field trip permission slip to the front desk to have it scanned a small ordinary thing, and he looked up, and there was a man he'd only ever seen in Olivia's flinch, in the way her voice had folded around a name 4 days ago. Tall, easy in his own skin, the kind of handsome that came with generations of money behind it, so it never had to work for anything. And Daniel knew the second he saw him that this was a man who had never once in his life been overlooked. Alexander walked up to the front desk like he owned it, and maybe in some paper way he did, and he said to the receptionist loud enough for the whole lobby, "Tell Olivia that Alex is here. She'll want to know." And Daniel, standing 3 feet away, holding a second grader's field trip form, watched half the lobby turn and heard the whispers start and understood that the war had officially begun, and he was standing in it in his gray coat with a permission slip in his hand. He did the only thing he could do. He set the form on the desk, said, "When you get a chance," to the receptionist, and walked to the elevator without looking at Alexander Reed even once. Behind him, he heard Alexander say to no one in particular, amused, "Who was that?" And he heard the receptionist say, "That's Mr. Carter. He works here." And he heard Alexander laugh not cruelly, which was worse because cruelty would have meant Daniel registered as a threat. It was the laugh of a man dismissing a piece of furniture. "Of course he does," Alexander said, and that was all Daniel Carter was to him, and the elevator doors closed on it. Upstairs, Olivia was already standing at her window with her back to the door when Daniel came in, and she didn't turn around and she said, "He's here, isn't he? He's in the lobby, with flowers. Roses. I didn't get that close. There'll be roses. He always did roses. 24 red because he read once that anything less looked cheap and anything more looked desperate, and Alexander has never in his life allowed himself to look either." She still didn't turn around. "He'll come up in about 10 minutes. He's letting the lobby see him first. He wants it to be a thing by the time he reaches me, so that when he walks into my office, it's already a story everyone's telling. You know him well. I was going to marry him." Now she turned, and her face was composed, but Daniel had learned to read the small things by now, and the small things were screaming. Daniel, I need you to do something for me, and you're not going to like it. Okay. I need you to leave, right now. I need you gone from this floor when he comes up, and I need you to not be anywhere he can find you today. Daniel felt it land in his gut. You want to hide me? No. She crossed to him fast. No. Listen to me. This is not hiding you. This is not me being ashamed. This is strategy, and you promised me no more deciding things alone. So I'm not deciding. I'm asking, I'm telling you why, and I'm asking. Alexander is going to come up here looking for a reaction. He wants to see if I'm still soft on him. He wants to see if there's competition. If he sees you, if he sees us, he'll know exactly where to aim, and my father will know, and the whole thing accelerates before we're ready. But if he comes up here and finds me cold and alone, and exactly the way he remembers me, he gets confident. And confident men get sloppy. Her hands found his. I need him underestimating everything, including you, especially you. Can you let me do that? Can you let him think you're furniture for a little while longer? Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Everything in him. Everything a man is built to feel when another man walks into the building with roses for the woman he loves was standing up and pushing back against it. And he pushed all of it down because he'd spent his whole life being underestimated, and he knew something Olivia was only just learning. I've been furniture my whole life, he said quietly. You don't have to sell it to me. Being invisible is the one thing I'm genuinely good at. He squeezed her hands. But Olivia, I'll walk out that door and let him think I'm nothing. I'll do it all day. On one condition. Name it. When it's over, whenever this thing ends, whatever it costs, I don't stay furniture. Not to you. I'll be furniture to the whole world if it protects us. But the day this is done, I need you to stand somewhere everyone can see and make me real. Because I can be invisible for a strategy. I can't be invisible forever. Not again. Not even for you. Something broke open in her face. I promise, she said. I swear to God, when this is over, I will make you the most seen man in this city. Now go. Please. He's coming. He went. He took the stairs so he wouldn't pass Alexander in the elevator 10 flights down in his gray coat, and every step he told himself it was strategy. It was smart, she was right, and every step. It still felt like retreat, because that's what it looks like from the inside, even when it's the right call. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't have known from the stairwell, was what happened in that office over the next 20 minutes. Because Alexander Reed came up exactly on schedule, exactly the way she'd predicted, roses and all, and he walked into her office with that magazine smile and set 24 red roses on her desk and said, "You look exactly the same. It's infuriating." And Olivia, who was the finest actor Daniel would ever meet, gave Alexander Reed precisely the woman he expected to find. She let him sit. She let him talk. She let him do the whole performance, the 2 years abroad, the deals he'd closed, the way he'd realized out there in all that success that the only thing missing was her. She let him reach across and take her hand, and she didn't pull it back, and she watched his confidence swell to fill the room. And the entire time, behind her cool, composed face, she was doing the thing her father had trained into her before she was old enough to know it was being trained. She was gathering information. Because Alexander, confident and sloppy exactly as designed, told her things. He told her, laughing, that her father had practically begged him to come back, that the old man was worried about her judgment lately, that there'd been talk of her getting distracted by the help. And Olivia laughed along, a light, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Alex, you know how Daddy exaggerates," and inside she was filing every word away like ammunition, because now she knew for certain her father and Alexander weren't just aligned. They were coordinated. This was a joint operation. And a joint operation had a shared plan, and a shared plan had a shared weakness, and she just had to find it. She found the first piece of it 40 minutes in, when Alexander, relaxed, now sure he was winning, mentioned the merger. "The Hartwell deal," he said, waving a hand. "Your father tells me you've been dragging your feet, which is very unlike you. Time was Olivia Bennett didn't drag her feet on a 9-figure merger. Time was, you'd have closed that in a weekend." He smiled. "See, this is what I mean. This is the distraction talking. And Olivia kept her face perfectly still, and inside her everything went cold and clear, because Alexander Reed had just made a mistake that dwarfed every other mistake, and he had no idea he'd made it. She had never told Alexander about the Hartwell deal. Almost no one knew about the Hartwell deal. It was 3 weeks from announcement. It was sealed inside the tightest circle in the company herself. 2 VPs legal and 1 other person who handled the operational logistics of pulling a merger together quietly. Marcus Webb. And now Alexander Reed, freshly back from 2 years abroad, knew the internal nickname for a deal that hadn't been announced, along with the private detail that she'd been dragging her feet. There was exactly one road that information could have traveled. From inside her own company, through Marcus Webb, out to her father, and now sitting across her desk wearing a magazine smile and holding 24 roses. Olivia Bennett smiled at the man she'd almost married, and thought with a clarity that felt almost like relief, there it is. There's the weakness. It was never you, Alexander. You're just the face. The real problem is a leak, and I know exactly who's leaking, and the 2 of you just handed him to me. You're right, she said sweetly. I have been distracted. It's good to have you back, Alex. You always did see me clearly. And Alexander Reed left her office an hour later, absolutely certain he was winning, which was the most useful thing he could possibly have done. Daniel found out none of this until that night, because Olivia didn't text him a word of it during the day. Deliberately, she told him later, because Marcus was watching her phone habits now, and a change in pattern was information. She waited until 9, until she was in a car with no plates that could be traced, and she called him, and the first thing she said was, "I know how they're doing it." Daniel sat up on his couch. Emma was asleep. The apartment was dark. Doing what? Everything. The whole operation. I know the shape of it now. Her voice was electric fast, the voice of someone who'd been playing defense for weeks and had just found the seam. Daniel, it's Marcus. Marcus Webb has been feeding my father company intelligence for, I don't know how long, months at least, maybe longer. He knows things Alexander should have no way of knowing, and the only bridge between the inside of my company and Alexander's mouth is Marcus, the guy from the supply closet. The guy from the supply closet. The one who just happened to be standing outside that door. The one who just happened to see you get into my father's car. The one who came running to me so eager to help. Her breath came fast. He's not a gossip, Daniel. I thought he was a gossip. He's a plant. My father put him in my company, or bought him after the fact. I don't know which yet, and he has been sitting 6 feet from me for God knows how long reporting everything. And I never saw it, because I was so busy watching the door for enemies that I never once checked the people already inside the walls. Daniel was quiet for a second, and then he said the thing that changed the whole shape of the war. Olivia, if he's been reporting everything. He kept his voice level. Then he's been reporting us. From the beginning. He knows. Not suspects. Knows. The line went silent. Marcus knows about the grocery store. Daniel went on because once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it, and he wasn't going to manage her by hiding it. He knows about the supply room. He's known this whole time, and he's been sitting on it, and he's been feeding it up the chain to your father in pieces on a schedule whenever it's most useful. That's why your father knew where I lived. That's why he was so sure I'd take the money. He wasn't guessing about us. He had a full report. Oh my God, Olivia said quietly. Which means, Daniel said, and here his voice roughened, because now they were at the part that scared him. Your father already has everything he needs to hurt us whenever he wants to. He's not gathering ammunition anymore. He's holding it. He's waiting for the moment it does the most damage. And the fact that he hasn't used it yet doesn't mean we're safe. It means he's found a moment he likes better than now. The Hartwell deal. Olivia said it out loud the same second she thought it. The merger. The announcement. That's the moment. It's the biggest day of my year. Press the board, the Hartwell people. My father sitting in the front row, because he's still on the board, all of it in one room. That's where he'll do it. He'll stand up in front of the entire industry and he'll expose us in a way that makes me look like a woman who compromised a 9-figure deal because she was—" her voice caught on the ugliness of it, "because she was sleeping with the help. That's the play. That's why he's been holding it. He's not going to whisper it in a supply closet. He's going to detonate it on stage." Daniel closed his eyes in the dark. How long until the announcement? 16 days. 16 days. He let that sit. And then he did the thing he'd promised her he'd do, the new thing, the hard thing he didn't retreat into carrying it alone, and he didn't go noble and offer to disappear for her sake. He stayed in the road. "Okay," he said. "Then we've got 16 days to change the ending." Daniel. "No, listen to me. Because I've been on the wrong end of powerful people my whole life, and I know one thing about them that people like your father forget." He stood up, moved to the window, kept his voice low so Emma wouldn't wake. "They only win when they control the timing. That's their whole edge. They pick the moment, they pick the room, they pick the audience, and then they detonate when you're least ready. Your father's entire plan depends on that announcement being his moment, on you not knowing it's coming, on you walking into that room thinking it's the best day of your year." He turned from the window. "But we do know. Marcus handed it to us 4 days early through Alexander's big confident mouth. So the one thing your father doesn't have anymore, the only thing, is surprise. What are you saying?" "I'm saying we don't wait 16 days to play defense in his room on his terms." Daniel's voice was steady, and there was something in it. Olivia had never heard something that had been buried under 11 years of being small. "I'm saying we get there first. We take the one advantage we have, that we know the shape of it, and he doesn't know we know, and we build something with it. We flip the room. We make the announcement ours." "How?" "I don't know yet." He almost laughed. "I'm a project coordinator, Olivia. I coordinate. Give me a mess in 16 days and I'll build you a plan, but I need everything. Everything Marcus knows, so I know what your father thinks he knows. Everything about the Hartwell deal. Everything about Alexander. And I need one more thing, and it's the hard one. Name it. I need you to stop protecting me from the ugly parts." He said it gently. "You didn't tell me Alexander was coming until your father forced your hand. Today, you sent me down the stairs. I understood all of it, and you were right about all of it. But Olivia, if we're going to do this in 16 days, I can't be furniture to you. Furniture to the world, fine. But you have to let me all the way in. Even the parts you think will hurt me. Even the part where you almost married him. Even the part of you that's still a little bit scared your father might be right about me making you soft. I need all of it because you can't plan around a thing you're not allowed to look at." There was a long silence on the line. "He didn't just leave me," Olivia said finally, quietly. "Alexander, everyone thinks he left me or that it was mutual, or that we drifted. That's the story. The real story is, I found out 3 weeks before the wedding that he'd only ever wanted the merger of our family's companies. That the whole thing 2 years the ring, the way he looked at me, it was a business acquisition wearing a wedding, and I found out by accident. I overheard him on a phone call laughing, telling someone he'd locked down the Bennett position. That's what I was. A position. And I called it off, and my father was furious not because Alexander broke my heart, but because I let emotion cost me a strategic alliance." Her voice was steady, but Daniel could hear what steadiness cost her. "So when you ask why I'm scared my father's right, that's why. Because the last time I let a man close it, turned out I was a spreadsheet with a pretty face, and my own father agreed I should have married him anyway. And some small broken part of me has spent 3 years wondering if that's just what I am. A position. An asset. Not a person anybody stays for." Daniel stood in his dark apartment with his heart cracking down the middle. "Olivia," he said, "come here. Right now. Come to the apartment. It's 10 o'clock. Emma's asleep. And Marcus is probably— I don't care about Marcus tonight. I care that you're sitting in a car in the dark telling me you think you're a spreadsheet, and I'll be damned if I let you fall asleep believing that." His voice was rough. "Come here. Don't come as a strategy. Don't come as the CEO. Come as the woman who burns eggs. Emma made you a drawing today, did you know that? At school? She drew you. She drew a lady with yellow hair holding 3 ice cream cones, and she made me promise to give it to you. It's sitting on my counter right now, so come get your drawing. Olivia, come find out what you actually are to the people in this apartment, because it is not a position, and it is not an asset, and I swear to God, it is not a spreadsheet. The line was quiet for a long, long moment. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she whispered. She came and she cried at the drawing, a lady with yellow hair holding 3 ice cream cones. Emma printed carefully in the corner and underneath it in a 7-year-old's shaky letters the words, "My dad's friend." And Daniel held her in his kitchen for the 2nd time, and this time when she said, "There's got to be a catch." He didn't argue, he just tightened his arms and said, "The catch is your father's got 16 days to blow up your whole life, and we're gonna stop him. That's the catch. That's the only catch. Everything in this apartment is real." And somewhere in the small hours of that night, over cold coffee and Emma's drawing and a legal pad, Daniel filled with the small, careful handwriting of a man who coordinated things. The two of them stopped grieving what was coming and started building against it. The first 10 days moved fast. Daniel, it turned out, was extraordinary at exactly one thing, and it was the thing that mattered now. He could take an enormous, tangled mess and find the single thread that, when you pulled it, unraveled the whole knot. It was why he was good in meetings. It was why the old man at his first job had bothered to teach him. And he sat with everything Olivia knew about Marcus and her father and Alexander and the Hartwell deal. And he pulled threads for 10 days, and slowly a plan took shape. The core of it was almost cruel in its simplicity. Her father's entire play depended on one asset, Marcus Webb, the leak, the man inside the walls. Marcus was the pipeline. Without Marcus, Richard Bennett went blind. He'd no longer know what Olivia knew, or when she knew it, or what she was planning. And a man who'd built his whole strategy on superior information became, without that information, just an angry old man on a board. "So we don't attack your father," Daniel said on the 11th night, standing at his counter with the legal pad. "You can't win a straight fight against your father. He's got 40 years on you, and he's still on the board, and half the industry owes him. We don't touch him. We take Marcus. We cut the pipeline, quietly. So quietly your father doesn't even know it's cut until he reaches for information he thinks he has and finds out it's old. How do we take Marcus without my father knowing? We feed him." Daniel almost smiled. "For the next 5 days, Marcus keeps reporting to your father, but everything he reports comes from us. We give him things to see. We let him overhear things. We let him think he's still the pipeline, and we control the water going through it. And what we send up that pipe is a story. The story that you're softening, that you're wavering, that Alexander's winning, that the merger's fragile, that I'm fading out just like your father wanted. We tell your father exactly the story he already wants to believe, and men believe fastest the thing they already want to be true." He set down the pen. So when he walks into that announcement, he's walking in confident. He's walking in thinking he's got a fragile daughter and a fading coordinator and a winning proxy and total information. He's walking in, expecting to nudge, not detonate. Because why detonate when you think you're already winning gently? Olivia was staring at him. And then, Daniel said quietly, "You announce a merger that isn't the one he thinks it is. And you do it in front of everyone. And you make it clear in a way he can never undo in that room that you saw all of it coming, and that the woman he built to survive anything just survived him." For a moment, Olivia didn't say anything at all. Then she said in a strange, soft voice, "You know what he'll do to you. After, when he realizes it was you. He told you in the car he never needs the easy version twice. If we do this, if we humiliate him in front of the entire industry, he will spend the rest of his life making sure a man named Daniel Carter never works in this city again. He'll take everything. Your job first. Then he'll make calls. You'll be unhireable. And Emma, I know. You could lose everything, Daniel. For a fight that's mine, not yours. You have a daughter. This is your whole burre. Olivia. He came around the counter and took her face in his hands. Do you remember what you said to me in your office when you grabbed my shirt? You said, "Don't you dare do the noble thing where you let me go for my own good." You said my whole life people decided things for me around me, and I let them, because I thought that's what love looked like. His thumbs moved along her cheekbones. So I'm going to say it back to you. Don't you dare decide for me that this fight isn't mine. Don't you dare protect me out of it. You just spent 10 days letting me all the way in. You don't get to push me back out now that it's dangerous. Your fight is my fight. Emma's future is safer in a world where you win than in a world where I stayed small and safe and let the people I love get run over by rich men. That's the whole thing. That's the whole point of the thing. His voice cracked on the old man's words. Somebody did it for me once, so I'll do it. I'll do it for you. Olivia's eyes filled. Besides, Daniel said, and now incredibly, he almost smiled. Your father made one mistake he's never going to recover from. What? He looked at me and saw furniture. Daniel's voice was quiet and certain. He offered a project coordinator an envelope of money and figured that was the whole transaction. He never once considered that the invisible man might be the most dangerous person in the building, because invisible men see everything, Olivia. Nobody watches what the furniture watches. I have sat in the corner of 1,000 rooms while powerful people forgot I existed and said things they'd never say if they thought I mattered. Your father thinks being nobody makes me weak. He shook his head slowly. It's the only advantage I've ever had. And in 16 days, I'm going to spend all of it on you. And that would have been the moment. That would have been the two of them aligned, armed a plan on the legal pad, and 16 days on the clock, ready to walk into that room and flip it. Except that at that exact moment, at nearly midnight, Daniel's phone lit up on the counter. A text. From Marcus Webb. Daniel picked it up and read it, and went completely still, and Olivia watched the color drain out of his face for the second time since she'd known him. What? She said. Daniel, what? He turned the phone around so she could read it. The message was 3 sentences long. I know everything. I've known since the grocery store. Meet me tomorrow, 7 a.m. before anyone's in, just you. Not her, or the story goes to your daughter's school first and the board second. And I make sure the little girl hears her daddy's a homewrecker before you can explain a single word. Olivia's hand came up over her mouth. Because it was all wrong. It was all wrong, and the wrongness of it was the most frightening part. Marcus wasn't supposed to move on his own. Marcus was supposed to be a pipeline, a tool, a plant, reporting up the chain, and pipelines don't send midnight threats about a man's 7-year-old daughter. Pipelines don't go off script, which meant one of 2 things, and both of them were worse than the plan they'd just spent 10 days building. Either Marcus Webb had stopped taking orders from Richard Bennett and started playing his own game. Or Richard Bennett had just decided 16 days early that the gentle version was over and had sent his man to threaten a child. Daniel set the phone down very slowly. When he looked up, the fear was gone from his face, and something Olivia had never seen there before had taken its place. Something cold and level and absolutely still. The look of a man who had spent his whole life absorbing hits, quietly taking them, and taking them, and taking them, right up until the moment somebody made the one mistake that he could not absorb. Somebody had just put his daughter in a text message. He shouldn't have mentioned Emma, Daniel said. His voice was very quiet. Everything else, the job, the money, the humiliation, the being furniture, all of that I can carry. I've carried worse. He looked at Olivia, and there was something in his eyes that made the powerful woman across from him understand for the first time that she had badly underestimated exactly how far the quiet man in the gray coat would go for the people he loved. But he put my little girl in a threat to get to me. So we're not waiting 16 days anymore, Olivia. He picked the phone back up. I'm meeting him at 7. No, Olivia said. Absolutely not. You are not meeting him alone. He said, alone. I don't care what he said. She was on her feet now, and the fear had turned into something fiercer. Daniel, this is exactly the trap. This is exactly how these people work. He gets you in a room with no witnesses. He records it, he twists it, and whatever you say, however careful you are, it comes out looking like you threatened him. I've watched my father do it 100 times. You walk into that room alone at 7 in the morning, and you are handing him the exact thing he wants. Then what do I do? Daniel said. And it wasn't a challenge. It was a real question, because this was the new thing between them. He wasn't deciding alone anymore. Because I'll tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not sitting here for 4 hours letting a man think he can put my daughter in a threat and get silence back. That's not happening. So tell me, you know these people. What do I do? Olivia stood very still for a moment. And then the CEO came all the way up in her, the strategist, the woman who'd been trained since childhood to find the move inside the trap. You go, she said slowly. But not the way he thinks. He wants you scared and alone at 7 in the morning. So you give him a scared man who came alone. Her eyes were moving fast now, the way they moved right before she took someone apart in a boardroom. And you let him talk. You don't threaten him. You don't argue. You barely say anything. You let him do all the talking because a man who thinks he's winning explains his whole plan. Remember, Alexander did it with the merger. Marcus will do it too. Frightened silence makes confident men explanatory. She came closer. And the whole time, Daniel, the whole time you're going to be recording every word. Daniel blinked. He'll check my phone. He'll check your phone. So the phone's going to be sitting on the table in plain sight, turned off, screen down, because that's what a frightened, cornered man does. He shows you he's not recording. A slow, dangerous smile. And it'll be my recorder that's running. Mine. In your coat pocket. The kind that doesn't look like anything. My father gave me one when I was 24 for exactly this kind of moment, and he'd absolutely die if he knew the first person I ever used it on was his own man. She was already moving, already pulling it from her bag, and Daniel realized she'd been carrying it this whole time. Two-party consent state, so we can't use it in court. But we're not going to court. We're going to a room full of the entire industry in 15 days, and there's no consent law about what you play for a board of directors. Daniel looked at the small device in her hand and felt the plan turn over. Felt it get sharper, and he understood something about her in that moment that went all the way down. Your father trained you for this, he said quietly. Every part of you that's good at this, he built it. To use on the world, and you're about to point all of it back at him. Yeah, Olivia said, and her voice caught just slightly. Poetic, isn't it? He made a weapon and forgot weapons can turn around. She pressed the recorder into his hand and closed his fingers around it. Now listen to me, because this is the part that matters more than the plan. You're going to walk into that room, and a bad man is going to say ugly things about you, and about us, and about Emma, and you are going to have to take it. You're going to have to stand there and let him think it's working. And every instinct you have as a father is going to be screaming at you to defend her. And you can't not in that room, because the second you fight back, you lose the recording. You lose the confidence. You lose everything. She held his eyes. Can you take it? Can you let a man threaten your daughter to your face and swallow it for 15 more days so we can win the whole war instead of one bad morning? And Daniel thought about 11 years of swallowing things, of standing in the doorway watching his wife's car pull out and not screaming, of being called furniture in a lobby and getting in an elevator, of 1,000 rooms where he'd made himself small and taken it and taken it and taken it. Swallowing things is the one thing I'm better at than anyone alive, he said. Turns out that might finally be worth something. At 6:52 the next morning, Daniel walked into the building. Marcus was already there in a small conference room on the 4th floor, the one nobody used, and he'd chosen it well. No cameras, no foot traffic, the kind of room where a thing could happen and leave no trace. He was sitting at the far end of the table with a coffee and the relaxed posture of a man who believed completely that he held every card. You came alone, Marcus said. Good, I wasn't sure you had the sense. Daniel sat down across from him. He set his phone on the table screen down and with a small performance of a frightened man showing he had nothing to hide, pressed the button so Marcus could see the screen go black. It's off, he said. His voice shook just enough, and the shake was half acting and half real because his daughter's name was still sitting in a text on that phone. Marcus glanced at it satisfied. Smart. See, that's the thing about you, Carter. You're not stupid. That's what makes this a shame. He leaned back. I actually don't have anything against you. I want you to understand that. This isn't personal. It felt personal, Daniel said quietly. When you put my kid in a text message, that felt pretty personal. Marcus had the grace to look for half a second, almost uncomfortable. Then it passed. That was leverage. You don't get to be leverage-free in a fight like this. Nobody does. You want to know what's personal. 22 years I gave this industry. 22 years, and I watched a girl in her 20s get handed a company because she had the right last name, and everybody stood around calling her a genius. His voice curdled. You know how many nights I stayed late while she got the credit. You know what it's like to be the competent one, the reliable one, the one who actually makes the trains run, and watch someone else get the corner office because of who her father is. And Daniel, sitting there in his gray coat, felt something cold move through him because he did know what that was like. He knew it better than Marcus ever would. And the difference between them, the whole difference, the entire difference between a good man and a bitter one, was that Daniel had taken that same wound and let it make him kind, and Marcus had taken it and let it make him this. So you went to her father, Daniel said. Keep him talking. Let him explain. I didn't go to anybody. Richard came to me. And there it was, the first real piece, the confession sliding out of a confident man, exactly the way Olivia had said it would. About a year ago. He was already worried about her, about the direction, the softness, all of it, long before you came along. He needed eyes inside. Someone who saw everything and answered only to him. Marcus spread his hands, almost proud. And I'll tell you, it's been the best year of my career. I finally matter. I finally have real power in this building, and none of them even know it. I sit in her meetings, and I nod, and I take notes, and every word goes straight up to the one person who actually runs this whole thing. The Hartwell deal, Daniel said softly. The Hartwell deal, the board politics, the client list, all of it. Richard's known about you and Olivia since your little grocery store moment, by the way. I sent him that the same night. He's just been deciding what to do with it. Marcus smiled, and now the smile had teeth. And here's what he decided, Carter. And here's why you're going to do exactly what I say. In 15 days at the Hartwell announcement in front of the entire industry, one of two things happens. Either you're already gone, quietly resigned, moved on, disappeared exactly like you should have when he handed you that envelope, or Richard stands up in that room and destroys her. Publicly. He exposes the whole thing, frames it as her compromising a 9-figure merger for an affair with a coordinator, and he uses it to force her out and hand the company to a caretaker board that answers to him. Either way, he wins. But only one way lets Olivia keep her dignity. He leaned in. So you resign. Today. You take that job in Denver, he offered. Yeah, I know about Denver, and you go, and you never see her again, and I make sure your daughter never hears a word. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. You disappear, and the woman you love gets to keep everything except you. And there it was, the whole plan, the confession, the mechanism, the timeline, Richard's name, the affair frame, the board coup, all of it, everything Olivia needed, spilling out of Marcus Webb's mouth in a room he thought was clean into a recorder he didn't know was running because a confident man explains his whole hand to a frightened one. Daniel sat there and took it. He let his hands shake. He let his eyes go wet, and that part wasn't acting at all, because a man had just laid out in cold detail a plan to burn down the woman he loved. He let Marcus see every bit of the anguish, because the anguish was the cover, the anguish was what sold it. And if I don't, Daniel said barely above a whisper, if I don't go, then I go to Emma's school first thing Monday. Marcus said it flatly, a man reading a grocery list. I've got a whole story ready. Concerned citizen worried about a little girl whose father's carrying on with his powerful married to the company boss. Teachers talk, Parents talk. That little girl's whole world becomes a whisper before she's 8, and it never fully goes away, Carter. You know it doesn't. Kids are cruel and small towns of parents are crueler. So you decide, your pride or her third-grade year. For a long moment, Daniel didn't say anything at all, and in that silence, everything in him that was a father stood up and roared and wanted to come across that table. Everything. He had never in his life wanted to hurt another human being the way he wanted to hurt Marcus Webb in that room. And he sat on all of it. He swallowed it whole the way he'd swallowed everything 11 years of practice, narrowing down to this one impossible moment of keeping still. Okay, Daniel said finally, quietly, brokenly. Give me the weekend. Let me figure out how to leave without it looking wrong. Let me tell Emma we're moving in a way that doesn't scare her. Monday. I'll resign Monday and we'll be gone by the end of the month. Just leave my daughter out of it, please. And Marcus Webb, who had just gotten everything he wanted, who believed completely that he'd broken the furniture, leaned back with the satisfied look of a man who'd never once considered that the person across the table might be smarter than him. Smart, he said again. See, I told you weren't stupid. Daniel stood up, picked up his dead phone, walked out of the room on legs that were somehow steady down the hall into the stairwell. And it wasn't until the stairwell door closed behind him that he stopped and put his back against the cold cinder-block wall and slid halfway down it and pressed the heel of his hand against his own mouth and shook with rage, with relief, with the awful weight of what he'd just swallowed. His phone buzzed. Olivia. She'd been in a car outside the whole time, unable to come in, going quietly out of her mind. Tell me you're okay, she said the second he answered. Tell me. I've got it, Daniel said. His voice was wrecked. Olivia, I've got all of it. Marcus, your father, the affair frame, the board coup, the timeline, Denver, the school, all of it. Every word. It's on the recorder. He told me everything. He told me everything. The line was silent for a second. Then Olivia said in a voice that broke down the middle, What did he threaten you with? To get you to sit there and take it. What did he say about Emma? And Daniel, who had promised no more managing, no more protecting her from the ugly parts, told her. All of it. The school. The whispers. The third-grade year. He stood in a stairwell and told the woman he loved the exact shape of the cruelty a man had aimed at her because of him. And he heard her start to cry, and he didn't soften it, because softening it would have been managing her, and he was done with that. He put a child... Olivia couldn't finish it. He looked at you, and he put a 7-year-old... Yeah, that's it, she said, and her voice changed, and Daniel had heard that change once before, the day she'd found out about the leak, the sound of a woman going from wounded to lethal. That's the last mistake either of them makes. I was going to do this clean. I was going to just cut the pipeline and win quietly and let my father save face, because he's still my father, and some stupid part of me still... Her breath hitched, still wanted him to be someone I could forgive. But he sent a man to threaten a little girl's third-grade year. So we're not doing it clean anymore. We're doing it in front of everyone, and when it's done, my father is going to understand that he didn't just lose a company. He lost a daughter, and he did it to himself, and he did it over a child. Olivia, come to my office, now. Front door, don't hide. I don't care who sees. We have 15 days, and I know exactly what we're going to do with them. Over the next 15 days, Daniel Carter learned what Olivia Bennett was actually capable of when she stopped fighting with one hand tied behind her back to protect her father's feelings. The plan sharpened into something surgical. They kept feeding Marcus his story. Daniel played the beaten man, quiet and defeated in the hallways, and word went up the pipeline exactly as designed. Carter's resigning. He's taking Denver. He's gone by month's end. The girl's back in line. Everything's going Richard's way. Marcus reported it. Richard believed it because it was the thing he wanted to be true. And Alexander Reed, still circling, still confident, told Olivia over a dinner she endured like a soldier that he was glad she was coming to her senses. She let all three of them believe they'd won. For 15 days, she wore the face of a woman being gently, inevitably steered back into place. And it was the performance of her life, and it cost her something every single day. because the man doing the steering was her own father. And underneath it, she and Daniel built the other thing. Daniel the coordinator. The invisible man who saw everything did what he was extraordinary at. He took the recording and he built a case around it. Not just Marcus's words, but the paper trail Marcus's words pointed to. Once you knew the leak was real, once you knew where to look, the evidence was everywhere, hiding in plain sight, the way a thing always is once you know its shape. Wire transfers, calendar overlaps. A dozen small things that meant nothing alone and meant everything together. And Daniel's whole gift was seeing the everything in the collection of nothings. And Olivia did the other half, the half only she could do. She went to the Hartwell people. Quietly. Not the version of the deal her father knew about, the one Marcus had been reporting. A different structure. One that didn't need her father's board faction at all. One that made his leverage worthless. One she'd been quietly redesigning for weeks and had let Marcus believe she was dragging her feet on. She hadn't been dragging her feet. She'd been building a version of her own future that her father couldn't touch and letting his own spy report it as weakness. "He thinks I've been too soft to close it," she told Daniel one night, the two of them and Emma at his kitchen table, Emma coloring, while the grown-ups plotted a war disguised as paperwork. "He's been telling everyone I lost my edge. And the whole time the reason it's been slow is I've been rebuilding it into something that cuts him completely out." She looked up. "He taught me that too, you know. Never let them see the real deal until it's already done. I learned it watching him do it to other people. I just never thought I'd do it to him." "Do you want to stop?" Daniel asked her gently. "It's your father, Olivia. Once this happens, you don't get him back after. I need you to be sure. Because I'll follow you into any room in this city, but I won't be the reason you burn down your own father if some part of you would spend the rest of your life wishing you hadn't." And Olivia looked at Emma, coloring at the table, humming to herself, "Safe and small." And 7, the child a grown man had threatened to hurt to win an argument. "He stopped being my father the second he sent Marcus after her," she said quietly. "I gave him 31 years and 1 company and every ounce of the person he built. He could have had all of it forever. All he had to do was let me be happy. And he looked at this." She reached out and touched Emma's hair so gently the little girl didn't even look up. "He looked at this and decided it was a problem to be solved. So no, I don't want to stop. I want to win. And I want him in the front row when it happens, so he understands all the way down that he did this to himself." The morning of the Hartwell announcement, the biggest room Bennett Group had ever filled, sat packed press along the back wall, the board in the reserved rows, the Hartwell executives, half the industry, and in the front row, exactly where Olivia had made sure he'd be seated, Richard Bennett, silver-haired, and certain next to Alexander Reed. The two of them relaxed, waiting for a coronation they were sure they'd engineered. Marcus Webb stood at the side of the room with a tablet running logistics, the loyal operations man, believing this was the day his year of work paid off. And Daniel Carter stood at the very back in his gray coat, being furniture one last time. Olivia walked to the podium. The room quieted. She looked out over all of it, the press, the board, the man who'd built her, and the man who'd tried to buy her, and the man who'd threatened a child on their behalf, and she began in a voice that carried exactly the way everyone expected. "Thank you all for coming. Today marks one of the most significant days in the history of this company." Richard Bennett smiled and settled back in his seat, comfortable, certain a father about to watch his plan land. He had no idea he was about to become the story. Because Olivia Bennett looked down at her father in the front row, and then she looked past him all the way to the back of the room to the invisible man in the gray coat. And she smiled, small and warm and absolutely lethal, the smile of a woman who had waited her whole life to stop being managed and had finally chosen her own moment. "But before I tell you about the merger," she said, "I need to tell all of you a story. It starts in a grocery store, and it ends today in this room with the truth about what this company has become and exactly who has been lying to keep it that way." The room went dead silent. And in the front row, for the first time in his life, Richard Bennett's certainty flickered. "A grocery store," Olivia said again, and her voice filled the silent room. 3 years ago, I was a woman who trusted no one. I ran this company on the belief that everyone who came close to me wanted something. And I was right often enough that I stopped checking. I want you to hold on to that because it matters to everything I'm about to say." Richard Bennett leaned forward slightly, and Daniel, watching from the back, saw the old man's hand find Alexander's arm, a small signal. "What is she doing?" And saw Alexander give the smallest shrug because Alexander didn't know either, because nobody in that room knew except the two people who'd built this moment. "Some of you have heard a rumor," Olivia went on, calm as still water. "It's been traveling this building for a few weeks now. That I've been distracted, that I've lost my edge, that I compromised the biggest deal of this company's year because I got involved with an employee." She let it sit. "I want to address it directly because in about 4 minutes, someone in this room was planning to stand up and say it out loud." A ripple went through the crowd. The press along the back wall came alive, phones rising. In the front row, Richard Bennett had gone very still, and Daniel watched the exact moment the old man understood that the room was no longer his, watched the certainty drain out of a face that had worn certainty for 60 years. "The rumor is true in one respect," Olivia said. "I did fall in love with someone this company employs. His name is Daniel Carter. He's a project coordinator. He has a 7-year-old daughter. And 3 years ago in a grocery store, he caught a jar before it hit the floor and called me a name he didn't mean to say out loud. And it was the first time in a decade anyone had treated me like a person instead of a position." Her voice didn't waver. "So yes, that part is true. I'm not going to stand up here and be ashamed of the one real thing in a life full of transactions." The room was breathless. "But everything else you heard," she said, and now the temperature of her voice dropped. "Everything else, that it made me weak, that it cost the company, that I compromised a merger, that part was manufactured. Deliberately. By people in this room. And I know exactly who. And I know exactly how. Because they've been telling a spy for the last 3 weeks, and the spy has been reporting to my own father, and my father has been sitting on it waiting for today, planning to stand up in front of all of you and use my personal life to force me out of the company I built and hand it to a board that answers to him." The word father went through the room like a current. Richard Bennett rose halfway out of his seat. "Olivia, sit down, Dad." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You wanted a public moment. You've got one. Sit down and let me finish it." And the most powerful man in that room, the man who'd controlled every room he'd walked into for 40 years, sat down because there was nothing else to do, because 200 people were watching. Because his daughter had just taken the one thing he'd always held and turned it around and pointed it at him exactly the way he'd taught her. "For the last year," Olivia said, turning back to the crowd, "there has been a leak inside this company. Someone feeding board strategy client information and confidential deal terms directly to my father, who is a board member, but not an executive, and who has been using that information to quietly move against the leadership of this company, his own daughter's leadership." She paused. "That someone is standing at the side of this room right now with a tablet in his hands, running the logistics for this very event. His name is Marcus Webb." Every head in the room turned. Marcus Webb went white. The tablet lowered in his hands. And Daniel, watching from the back, saw the exact face of a man who had believed completely that he was the one holding the leverage. The face of a man realizing 1 second too late that he'd walked into a room at 7 in the morning 15 days ago and explained his entire hand to a project coordinator he thought was furniture. "That's a lie," Marcus said, but his voice cracked on it and everyone heard the crack. "That's Olivia. This is defamation in front of the press. You can't." 15 days ago, Olivia said, ignoring him entirely, addressing the board rows. Now the Hartwell executives, the people who mattered. Marcus Webb sent a text message to Daniel Carter. In it, he threatened to spread a story to Daniel's 7-year-old daughter's elementary school to her teachers and the other parents unless Daniel resigned and left the city quietly. He did this on behalf of the plan to remove me. He put a child in a threat. Her voice stayed level, but everyone in the room felt the thing underneath it. And that morning Daniel met with him. Alone. Because Marcus demanded he come alone. She looked at the back of the room, at Daniel. "Daniel," she said, "play it." And Daniel Carter walked forward. Out of the back of the room, up the center aisle in his gray coat, past the press and the board and the executives, past Richard Bennett and Alexander Reed. And he was not furniture anymore. And every head turned to watch the invisible man become visible. And he climbed the 2 steps to the podium, and he took out a small recorder, and he set it on the microphone stand, and he pressed play. And Marcus Webb's voice filled the largest room in Bennett Group. "Richard's known about you and Olivia since your little grocery store moment. I sent him that the same night. In 15 days at the Hartwell announcement in front of the entire industry, either you're already gone, or Richard stands up in that room and destroys her, publicly. He exposes the whole thing, frames it as her compromising a 9-figure merger for an affair with a coordinator, and he uses it to force her out and hand the company to a caretaker board that answers to him." The room did not breathe. "I go to Emma's school first thing Monday. I've got a whole story ready. That little girl's whole world becomes a whisper before she's 8. Daniel pressed stop. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Daniel had ever heard, louder even than the silence in that grocery store 3 years before. 200 people, the press, the board, the Hartwell executives, all of them sitting in the wreckage of a plan that had just detonated in the wrong direction. And then it broke. The room erupted a wall of noise, reporters shouting questions, board members turning to each other, and in the middle of it, Marcus Webb stood frozen at the side of the room, with the whole industry looking at him. And Richard Bennett sat in the front row and did not move at all, because there was nowhere to move to. Olivia raised one hand, and slowly the room came back under her control, because it had always been her room, they'd just needed reminding. "Marcus Webb is terminated effective immediately," she said, and her voice was ice and steel and absolute authority. "Security will escort him out. Every transaction, every communication, every piece of board strategy he touched in the last year will be reviewed by outside counsel starting this afternoon. And to the board." She turned to the reserved rows. "You will have a full accounting of exactly what information left this company and where it went by end of week. Some of you may not have known. Some of you may have. We'll find out which." 2 security officers were already moving toward Marcus. He looked for one wild second like he might run or shout or turn to Richard for help, and Daniel watched him look at Richard. Bennett watched him wait for the powerful man to stand up and save him, the way powerful men always saved their tools. And Richard Bennett looked away. That was the thing that finished Marcus. Not the security officers. The look away. The moment the man he'd given a year of his loyalty to the man he'd betrayed a company for simply turned his head and let him be walked out because tools are disposable, and Marcus had just discovered what he'd always actually been. He didn't fight. He let them take him, and the whole room watched him go, and he never once looked back, because there was nothing behind him but the ruin of a bitter man who'd mistaken resentment for a plan. And then it was just Olivia and Daniel at the podium and Richard Bennett in the front row and 200 witnesses. "Now," Olivia said, and her voice softened just slightly, but everyone heard the danger still humming under it. "The merger. The real one. Not the version my father was told. Not the version Marcus reported." She clicked a remote, and behind her the terms went up on the screen, and Daniel watched the Hartwell executives lean forward and watch the board's faces change, because this was not the deal any of them had expected. "For 3 weeks I let everyone believe I was too distracted to close this. I let them believe I'd gone soft. I let my father's own spy report that I was dragging my feet." She turned and looked directly at Richard. "I wasn't dragging my feet, Dad. I was rebuilding it. Into a structure that doesn't need your board faction. That makes your leverage worth exactly nothing. That closes today right now in front of the press with the Hartwell principals in this room to sign it." She looked back at the crowd. "By the time you leave here, this deal is done, and there is not one thing anyone in this building can do to stop it." And the lead Hartwell executive, a gray-haired woman who'd been watching all of it with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen 100 corporate knife fights, stood up slowly and said into the silence, "Ms. Bennett, My people reviewed the new structure last night. It's the cleanest deal I've seen in 20 years. She glanced once at Richard Bennett with something like contempt. And I'll tell you, we were nervous coming in. We'd heard rumors this company had leadership problems. A thin smile. I think we just watched the leadership problem get solved. We're in. We'll sign today. The room broke into applause, real applause, the kind that starts uncertain and then swells as people decide which way the wind is blowing, and the wind was blowing hard toward the woman at the podium and the man in the gray coat beside her. And Richard Bennett rose from the front row. The applause faltered. Because everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew what they'd just heard about him. And the old man stood there in the middle of his daughter's triumph, and for a long moment he said nothing, and Daniel braced, because a cornered man with 40 years of power is never more dangerous than in the second after he loses. You've made your point, Richard said, and his voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of a man holding himself together by will alone. In front of the press, in front of the board. You've humiliated me thoroughly, Olivia. I hope it was worth the company. Because a stunt like this, airing this all of it publicly, it damages you too. It damages the brand. Investors don't like drama. You may have won the room, but you've cost the... I don't care, Olivia said. 2 words and they stopped him cold, because in 31 years, Richard Bennett had never once heard his daughter say she didn't care about the cost of something. I spent my whole life caring about the cost, she said. And now for the first time something raw came up under the steel, something that had been waiting decades to be said. You taught me to. You taught me to weigh everything. Price, everything, protect the brand, protect the position. Never let emotion cost you a strategic advantage. And I was so good at it, Dad. I was the best you ever built. I ran your lessons better than you ever did. Her voice caught. And it made me a woman who kept a stranger's child's crayon drawing in her purse because it was the closest thing to love I'd ever been allowed to hold. That's what your lessons built. A daughter who was so afraid of being wanted for the wrong reasons that she almost let the one person who wanted her for the right ones walk away because you told her he'd make her soft. Richard's jaw tightened. He will. You just torched your own reputation over a... He caught a jar, Olivia said. 3 years ago, that's all he did. He caught a jar before it broke, and a word slipped out of him that he'd been holding for years, and it was the truest thing anyone had ever said to me. And you looked at that. You looked at the first real thing in my entire life, and you decided it was a problem to be solved. Her voice dropped, and it was somehow more terrible for how quiet it got. And then you sent a man to threaten a 7-year-old's 3rd grade year. To get to me. You put a child in the machine, Dad. And I want you to understand something standing here in front of all these people, because you'll never let me say it to you in private. She stepped out from behind the podium. She walked to the edge of the stage close to him, and she said it looking down into the face of the man who'd built her. You didn't lose the company today. The company was always going to be fine. You lost me. That's what this cost you. Not the brand, not the deal. Me. Your daughter. And you did it yourself, over a good man and a little girl, because you couldn't stand to see me choose something you couldn't control. Her eyes were wet now, but her voice never broke. Go home, Dad. You're still on the board until the review says otherwise. But you are not in my life anymore. You spent 31 years teaching me that everyone wants something and no one stays. Congratulations. You were the last lesson. You were the one who proved it. And I'm choosing not to learn it. For a long, long moment, Richard Bennett stood in the front row of the room he'd expected to conquer and looked up at his daughter, and something moved across his face. Daniel saw it from 6 feet away, saw the flicker of a man who was underneath all that granite, still a father, and who had just understood all the way down what he'd traded, and that he could never trade it back. But Richard Bennett had spent 60 years never once showing that flicker to a room, and he wasn't going to start now. He picked up his coat. He turned, and he walked out of his daughter's company through a crowd that parted for him out of old habit and nothing else, and the doors closed behind him. And that was the last time he ever stood in a room Olivia Bennett owned. Alexander Reed, Daniel noticed, had already quietly left. Sometime during the recording. The proxy had understood before the principal did that there was no position left to lock down, and men like Alexander don't stay for the part where they lose. He simply wasn't there anymore, and no one, least of all Olivia, ever wondered where he'd gone. The Hartwell deal was signed that afternoon. The story that ran the next morning was not the story Richard Bennett had planned. It wasn't a story about a distracted CEO who'd compromised a merger for an affair. It was a story about a woman who'd caught a corporate spy, closed a landmark deal, and stood up in front of the entire industry and refused to be ashamed of loving someone the world thought was beneath her. The public, it turned out, did not find any of it damaging. The public found it the most human thing a CEO had done in years. Investors who Richard had promised would flee from drama did the opposite. They liked a leader who couldn't be blackmailed, who'd rather burn the secret herself than let it be used against her. The stock, when the markets opened, went up, and Daniel Carter, who had spent 11 years being furniture, woke up the next morning to find that the whole city knew his name. It changed everything, and it changed nothing, because the things that mattered were still exactly the same. Emma still lived on marshmallow cereal if he let her. He still made spaghetti because it was the only thing he made well. And Olivia, the CEO. The whole city was suddenly talking about the woman who'd become a symbol overnight, still couldn't cook an egg, and still cried at the potato drawings, and still showed up at his small apartment in jeans with too much ice cream because she'd panicked in the store. The board review took 3 months. It found what Daniel had already found, laid out in the small, careful handwriting of a man who coordinated things, a year of leaked information, a paper trail that led straight to Richard Bennett, and enough for the board to quietly and permanently remove him. He didn't fight it. Somewhere in those 3 months, the old man seemed to age a decade, and Daniel almost felt something for him. But then he'd remember a text message with his daughter's name in it, and the almost would pass. Olivia never spoke to her father again. He tried once about a year later, a letter handwritten 3 pages. Daniel watched her read it at the kitchen table, watched her get to the end, watched her fold it careful as anything, the same way she'd once folded a stranger's child's crayon cat. What did it say? He asked her. That he was sorry, that he did it because he was afraid of losing me, and he lost me anyway, and he sees that now. She set the letter down. That he'd like to meet Emma someday, to be a grandfather, to do it differently. And Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Emma, asleep down the hall, the little girl a man had once put in a threat to win an argument. He doesn't get to be a grandfather to the child he threatened, she said quietly. Maybe that makes me hard. Maybe I learned that from him too. But some doors you don't get to open twice. He taught me that. He just didn't think I'd ever use it on him. She slid the letter into a drawer. Not the trash, a small mercy or a small hope. Daniel never asked which, and she closed it, and she never mentioned it again. They married in the spring quietly, in a way that had nothing to do with the company, or the city, or the story everyone thought they knew. Emma was the flower girl, and took the job with the deadly seriousness of a 7-year-old given real responsibility. And she informed everyone present that Olivia was now officially her friend, and her something else, a word she was still working out, and eventually landed on all on her own, with no prompting from anyone. Because one evening, a few weeks before the wedding, Emma had climbed into Olivia's lap, the way she'd once only climbed into her father's, and she'd said the thing children say when they've decided something in the quiet, private way children decide the biggest things. Are you staying forever? And Olivia, who had spent her whole life certain that no one ever stayed, that everyone wanted something, that she was a position and not a person. Olivia looked at Daniel across the small apartment, and he smiled at her, and she looked back down at the little girl in her lap. I'm not going to promise you life is always going to be easy, she said. I don't make promises I can't keep. That's one thing your grandfather did teach me that was worth keeping. She smoothed Emma's hair. But I promise you this, and I will never take it back. I will always choose you. Both of you. Every single time, in every single room, in front of anyone. Even when it costs me something. Especially when it costs me something. Because I finally learned the difference between what a thing costs and what a thing is worth, and you two are the only things I've ever held that were worth more than they cost. Emma considered this with great gravity. Okay, she said. And then, having settled the largest question of her small life, she asked, "Can we have ice cream?" And they did. 3 kinds. Because Olivia still panicked in the store. A year to the day after the announcement, the 3 of them went back to the grocery store, where all of it had started. It wasn't planned exactly. They just needed groceries for a family dinner, and it was the closest store, and Olivia stopped in aisle 7, the way you stop at a place that made you, and she looked at Daniel, with a smile he'd learned to read as trouble. "Remember this place?" she said. Unfortunately, Daniel said yes. Emma had already run ahead toward the cereal on a mission that would end in marshmallows one way or another. And Olivia reached up toward the top shelf deliberately, slowly, her eyes on him the whole time, toward a jar she absolutely did not need. "Should I be careful?" she asked. And Daniel Carter, who was not furniture anymore, who had a wife and a daughter and a name. The whole city knew, who had spent 11 years being small and had finally learned. He never had to be small again. Daniel stepped in close and put his hand over hers on the jar, and there was no accident in it this time, and no fear, and nothing to hide from anyone. "Careful, baby," he said. And Olivia smiled because the word wasn't a mistake anymore, and it had never really been one. It had just been the truth arriving a little early before either of them was ready to hear it. It was a promise now. It always had been. The powerful woman who'd been taught that everyone leaves had found the one man who stayed. The invisible man who'd been taught he'd carry everything alone had found the one woman who'd stand in the road beside him. And the little girl who'd lost one mother had gained something no one could ever threaten out of her again, a family that chose her out loud in front of everyone, every single time. Some words are accidents. This one was a vow, and they kept it for the rest of their lives.